December 23rd, 1985, Hendersonville, Tennessee, 4:47 a.m. Johnny Cash sat alone in his study, holding a leather-bound diary he'd discovered while cleaning out his father's belongings. Ray Cash had died 3 weeks earlier, and Johnny had been avoiding this task. Now, reading his father's private words from 1944, Johnny felt his entire understanding of his childhood crumbling. The entry was dated August 12, 1944, the day before his brother Jack died, and what his father had written would haunt Johnny for the rest of his life. What the world didn't know was that the tragedy that defined Johnny Cash, the guilt he carried for decades, the pain that fueled his greatest music, was built on a truth far more complicated than anyone imagined. But what nobody knows is what really happened in the Cash family before Jack's death, and why Johnny's father kept a secret that shaped his son's entire life. The family nobody understood. Summer 1944, DS, Arkansas. The Cash family appeared typical for their time and place. Poor cotton farmers, struggling through hard times, raising their children with discipline and faith. But inside that small house, tensions were building that nobody outside the family could see. Ray Cash was a hard man, shaped by poverty, broken by the Depression, angry at a world that had given him so little. He worked brutal hours in the cotton fields, came home exhausted, and had little patience for his 7 children. Johnny, at 12 years old, was the middle child. Not the oldest, not the youngest, not particularly exceptional at anything. Just there. But Jack, 14 years old, was different. Jack was special, smart, kind, destined for something better than picking cotton. Everyone said so. The teachers loved him. The church praised him. Even Ray, who rarely showed affection, seemed to soften around Jack. "That boy's going to be a preacher," Ray would say with rare pride. "He's going to make something of himself." Johnny heard that and felt invisible. He tried harder in school, but his grades never matched Jack's. He tried to be good, but he was restless, prone to questioning, always slightly disappointing. The only thing Johnny had that was truly his own was music. He'd sing while working, make up melodies, lose himself in the radio shows when he got the chance. "Stop that singing and focus on your work," Ray would bark. "Music won't feed a family. Music won't get you anywhere." But Jack was different. "I like your singing, JR, Jack would say, using Johnny's childhood nickname. "You've got a gift. Don't let Daddy take that from you." Jack was the only person who saw Johnny as more than just another mouth to feed. The only person who made him feel like he mattered. That's why what happened next destroyed Johnny so completely. You're not ready for what Johnny's father wrote in that diary, the entry that changed everything. December 1985, reading his father's words. Johnny's hands trembled as he read the diary entry from August 12, 1944. "Tomorrow, Jack starts his new job at the mill. I told him not to take it. The saw is dangerous, the foreman drinks, the safety standards are poor. But we need the money desperately. The crop is failing. We're behind on payments. If we don't get cash soon, we'll lose everything." Jack insisted he wants to help. He's always been the responsible one, the one who thinks of the family first. JR offered to take the job instead, but I said no. JR is too young, too careless. He'd hurt himself first day. "Jack is careful. Jack is smart. Jack will be fine. God forgive me. I'm sending my best boy into danger because we need $3 a week." Johnny read that paragraph 5 times, each time feeling the weight of it crushing him more completely. His father had known the job was dangerous. Johnny had offered to go instead. And his father had chosen Jack because he valued Jack more. The next entry was dated August 13th, written in shaking handwriting. "Jack is dead. The saw caught him. He suffered for a week and died this morning. I killed my son. I sent him there knowing it was dangerous. JR keeps saying he should have been there, should have stopped it, should have died instead. He doesn't know I chose Jack over him. He doesn't know I'm the one who sent Jack to his death." And then the entry that broke Johnny completely. JR will carry this guilt his whole life. He'll think he failed his brother. But the truth is worse. I failed both of them. I valued one over the other. I sent the good one to die and kept the disappointing one safe. And I'll never tell JR the truth because knowing it would destroy him more than the guilt he already carries. I'll let him blame himself. It's better than him knowing I'm the one to blame. Better than him knowing I chose wrong. Johnny sat in his study as dawn broke, understanding for the first time that the guilt he'd carried for 41 years was built on his father's lie. He hadn't failed Jack. His father had sacrificed Jack, and then let Johnny torture himself rather than admit the truth. Don't miss what this revelation did to Johnny. The spiral nobody saw coming. January 1986 to June 1986. After reading his father's diary, Johnny fell into the darkest depression of his life. June watched helplessly as her husband withdrew, stopped eating, barely slept. "Talk to me," she begged. "Tell me what's wrong." "My father," Johnny finally said. He knew. He knew Jack's job was dangerous. He sent him anyway, and he let me think it was my fault for 40 years. "Oh, Johnny." "I offered to go instead, June. I was 12 years old, and I offered to take that job. And my father said no because he thought Jack was worth more than me. And then when Jack died, he let me carry the guilt because it was easier than admitting he'd chosen wrong." June held him while he cried. But she couldn't fix this. Nobody could. Because the revelation didn't ease Johnny's pain. It complicated it. Now he had to grieve not just for Jack, but for the childhood he'd spent trying to earn a dead father's approval. For the decades he'd punished himself for a failure that was never his. For the relationship with his father that had been built on a lie. "Should I tell people?" Johnny asked June. "Tell them what really happened. What good would it do? Your father is dead. Jack is dead. The only person left to hurt is you." But Johnny couldn't let it go. He started writing a song about it, trying to make sense of the betrayal. He filled notebooks with verses he'd never record, questions he'd never answer. "Did he ever love me?" Johnny wrote. "Or was I just the spare? The one he kept safe not because I mattered, but because losing Jack was enough loss for one family." You won't believe what Johnny discovered next. The second diary, March 1986. Another devastating truth. While going through more of his father's belongings, Johnny found a second diary, this one from 1952 to 1955. The years when Johnny was trying to break into music, when he was in the Air Force writing letters to Vivian, when he was dreaming of a life beyond cotton fields. Ray Cash had been keeping track of his son's journey, but not with pride. June 1953. JR writes that he wants to be a musician when his service ends. What foolishness. The boy has never been practical, always dreaming, never facing reality. Jack would have understood responsibility. Jack would have made something real of himself. But JR chases fantasies. Another entry, January 1955. JR got some kind of record contract. I don't understand this music business. It seems like a waste of time to me, but maybe he'll prove me wrong, though I doubt it. He's never been the son who succeeds. And then, November 1956, after Johnny had his first hit, they played JR's song on the radio today. I Walk the Line. The whole town is talking about it. People keep congratulating me, saying I must be proud. I don't know what to feel. I never thought the boy had it in him. Maybe I was wrong about him. Maybe he's worth something after all. Johnny read that line over and over. Maybe he's worth something after all. Even in success, even when Johnny had proven himself, his father's approval was conditional. Grudging. Too little, too late. The final entry about Johnny, from 1958. JR. Came home for a visit, brought his wife and baby daughter. He's making good money now, more than I ever made. He offered to buy us a new house. I told him no. I don't want charity, especially from a son who abandoned the family to chase fame. He looked hurt, but he needs to understand that success doesn't erase the years he disappointed me, doesn't change that he's not the son I lost. Johnny closed the diary and understood something terrible. His father had never forgiven him for surviving when Jack died. Every achievement Johnny made, every success, was just a reminder of what Jack might have accomplished if he'd been the one to live. Johnny hadn't been living his own life. He'd been living Jack's shadow, the confrontation Johnny never had. April 1986. The letter Johnny wrote but never sent. Unable to confront his dead father in person, Johnny wrote a letter he knew no one would ever read. Dad, I found your diaries. I know the truth now. About Jack's death. About how you saw me. About how you never forgave me for being the wrong son who survived. I spent 40 years trying to earn your approval. Trying to prove I was worth keeping alive. Trying to become someone you could be proud of. And now I know it was never possible. Because you didn't see me. You saw the absence of Jack. Every time I succeeded, you resented it because it reminded you of what you'd lost. Every time I struggled, you were disappointed because I wasn't living up to Jack's potential. I was never going to be enough because I was never supposed to be the one who lived. You want to know the cruelest part? I loved you. Even when you were hard. Even when you couldn't show affection. Even when you made it clear Jack was your favorite. I loved you. Because you were my father, and I needed you to see me. Just once, I needed you to look at me and be proud of who I was, not disappointed about who I wasn't. The music you dismissed as foolishness became my life's work. The dreams you mocked came true. I became someone, not to replace Jack, but to be myself. And you never acknowledged it, not really. Even when the whole world knew my name, you still saw me as the disappointing son who wasn't worth as much as the one you lost. I forgive you for sending Jack to that mill. That was a decision made from desperation, from poverty, from impossible circumstances. But I can't forgive you for letting me carry the guilt, for letting me torture myself for 40 years when you knew the truth. That was cruelty. That was choosing your own comfort over your son's peace. I'll never send this letter. You're gone, and there's no point in being angry at a dead man. But I needed to write it, needed to say that I mattered, that I was worth more than you gave me credit for, that I deserved better than to spend my life chasing the approval of a father who'd decided I was the wrong son before I was old enough to understand what that meant. Johnny sealed the letter in an envelope and put it in his safe. June found it there after his death, 17 years later. The music that came from pain, 1986 to 1994. After discovering his father's diaries, Johnny's music changed. He'd always sung about pain, about darkness, about guilt. But now there was something raw, something more honest in his voice. He recorded songs about fathers and sons, about inherited wounds, about the weight of being the one who survived. He never explained why these themes suddenly dominated his work, but those who knew him understood. You're writing about your father, June said one day. I'm writing about what it means to be the wrong person, Johnny replied. To be chosen for the wrong reasons and rejected for the right ones. To spend your life trying to earn love from someone who'd already decided you weren't worth it. Your father loved you. Maybe, in his way. But love that comes with resentment isn't really love. It's obligation. And I spent 50 years trying to turn his obligation into pride. Johnny never publicly discussed his father's diaries. He never told interviewers about the revelations that had shattered him. He protected his father's reputation even after death, even after betrayal. Why don't you tell people? His daughter Roseanne asked. Why protect him after what he did? Because telling the story doesn't change it, Johnny said. And because he was broken too. Broken by poverty, by loss, by a world that gave him nothing. He did the best he could with what he had. It just wasn't enough. And I can be angry about that, or I can accept it. I'm trying to accept it. But acceptance didn't mean peace. Some wounds don't heal. They just scar over. The final understanding. 2003. Johnny's last months. In his final year, after June died, Johnny thought constantly about his father, about Jack, about the life he'd lived in response to wounds he'd never fully understood. Do you think Jack would be proud of me? He asked his son, John Carter. Dad, of course he would. But do you think he'd forgive me for living when he died? There's nothing to forgive. You didn't kill him. You didn't choose to survive. No, Johnny said quietly. But I spent my whole life feeling guilty for it. And now I know that guilt was planted in me by a father who blamed me for not being worth his sacrifice. You were worth it, Dad. Everything you became, everything you gave the world through your music, your compassion, your truth. You were worth it." Johnny smiled sadly. "Maybe. But my father never thought so. And there's no changing that now." When Johnny Cash died on September 12, 2003, his family found the letter to his father in his safe. They found the diaries, annotated with Johnny's notes and questions. They found decades of journals where Johnny wrestled with the revelation that his defining wound had been deliberately inflicted by the man who should have protected him. They never released any of it. The truth stayed private, as Johnny had chosen. The truth the legend hides. Here's what nobody talks about when they celebrate Johnny Cash. The pain that made him empathetic, that made him sing for prisoners and outcasts, and the forgotten, came from being treated as less than by his own father. Johnny Cash became the voice of the rejected because he knew what rejection felt like. From the man whose approval mattered most, his father's diaries revealed a truth more complicated than simple abuse or neglect. Ray Cash loved his sons, but he loved them unequally. He made a choice in desperation that killed one son, and he made another choice in cowardice that wounded the survivor for life. That's not a simple villain story. That's the tragedy of poverty and loss and human failure compounded across generations. Johnny could have been destroyed by that knowledge. Instead, he transformed it. He took the pain of being the wrong son, the survivor who carried unearned guilt, and he used it to connect with everyone who'd ever felt like they weren't enough. Every prison performance, every song about outcasts, every moment of compassion Johnny showed to the marginalized came from understanding what it felt like to be seen as less than, to be kept alive but not valued, to be loved conditionally and blamed unfairly. That's the real legacy, not the legend of the man in black who sang for prisoners, but the human being who survived his father's wound and chose to use it to heal others instead of destroy himself. Some truths are too painful to share while you're alive. Some secrets are kept not from shame, but from compassion, protecting the dead who can't defend themselves and the living who don't need to carry your burden. Johnny Cash kept his father's secret for 17 years after discovering it. He let the legend stand unchallenged. He never told the world what really happened to Jack, or how Ray Cash's choices shaped everything that followed. That wasn't weakness. That was wisdom. Understanding that some stories are yours to carry, not to tell. And in carrying that story silently, Johnny Cash proved he was worth far more than his father ever realized. He was the son who survived, the son who succeeded, the son who transformed inherited pain into compassion, the son who became somebody not despite being seen as the wrong one, but because of it. Ray Cash died never fully appreciating the son he'd dismissed. Johnny Cash died knowing he'd proven his father wrong, not through resentment, but through grace. That's the real story, not about a legend, about a man who was told he wasn't enough and decided to become more than enough anyway.